Thanks to the fact that it's the break time, we can be a little more relaxed and allow a little more time for questioning. But I want to begin with a question suggested by our students, which is not to our speakers, but to our audience. Well, let's get everybody sitting down. We're close to that already. And we'd like anyone who is a farmer or who is a retired farmer to please stand up. And we know all across the Midwest, or we hope, that in front of their computer screens or in places that are a little drier than here, people were standing up in their combines. I'd like to begin with modeling Dr. Triplett's question yesterday, a short science question. We've mentioned it several times, it's probably been good, but starting with you, Mr. Archuleta, but anyone else can chime in too. Explain a little bit more about aggregates and what's going on with that. That's soil science, what aggregates are.
Oh, aggregate. Even though I went to school for soil science, I really didn't grasp what an aggregate is. An aggregate is when you take sands, silts, and clays. Every soil in the world has sands, silts, and clays. It's just different percentage. The aggregate is when fungi, bacteria, all these incredible roots, root hairs, all these incredible life substances fuse the sands and silts together, making these super molecules that keep the pore space. They aggregate it, keep pore space open. So the more cottage cheese, more aggregates, the more porosity. It's created by biology, a little bit about chemistry, but predominantly biological. So the more carbon flow, you create these very labile carbon to hold and fuse and hold the sands and silts and clays in suspension.
Okay. Anything more to add from anyone?
I can add something.
Yeah.
So it is the structure, but it's also the process.
Yes.
So the process of creating aggregates is through the soil food web. And the soil food web is different trophic levels that feed on the trophic level that is below or below the one that they're in. So each time an earthworm will eat a nematode, it releases nutrients, but it also releases exudates with those nutrients, and it's those exudates and mucilages and those carbon compounds that glue things together. So it is the process, but it is also the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Dr.
And for this process, you need food for the food web.
Yep.
You need food for the earthworms, food for the bacteria, the nematodes, the fungi. So if you have no organic matter, biomass, energy inputs to soil, you have poor aggregation. So it's not a fixed arrangement. It changes. It's fueled.
Dr. Lau.
Aggregates is arrangement of particles through organic matter. Think about a heap of cement blocks. If those cement blocks are arranged into walls with passageways, with rooms, with storage space, those cement blocks become a usable structure. Now you can use the building. There are rooms, there are passageways through which people can pass. Similarly, that aggregate creates the pores, voids, through which roots can grow, through which water movement and nutrient come. That's the functional pore space of soil, just like building has functional space like a room and corridor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question first that kind of comes from me, but it's about a dialogue between the two speakers, and then I want to go to you guys responding to each other momentarily, but this will get it started. Dr. Archuleta, Ray the Soils guy, you have a compelling vision for how things could go and tell the story well. We also heard from Dr. Uketer that some other compelling visions in the past were compelling visions, and yet they didn't go anywhere. I'd like Dr. Uketer, if you could maybe respond a little bit to Ray's vision with that in mind, and then Mr. Archuleta, maybe you can respond to that.
Well, I think what you saw in the Ray's presentation is when I talked about profit power, it's there. It's right here. visible and at work. I was wondering a little bit, is this now John the Baptist or Jeremiah here? Can leave that, leave that to theologians. But I think it's important to recognize that there are already these two phases that soil expertise should have and needs to have. It has to have the expertise of the person who is passionate about the soil, but also needs the other phase that talks with farmers, keeps communication with farmers open, and allows to acknowledge what is already out there. One of my eureka moments was when I was going to archives and looking at farmers that were caught in this whirlwind transition in the 50s and 60s when the tractors came, the chemicals came, the DDT came, everything changed. And what I realized, first to my surprise, there was a lot of doubt about there. There were a lot of, should we really do this? This is not what I was taught in agricultural school. I was taught crop rotations, broad rotations. I was taught you should balance your enterprise, and then here I am going for monoculture. So there was a lot of concerns out there, a lot of visions out there, and not on the fringe, right there in the middle of the farming community. But the tragedy is very little came out of that because there were no people that were trading this, who were responding to this and plucking the things together. And I think what I talked about in terms of paths ahead, I think one of the crucial requirements for paths ahead is you need a coalition. The broader the better. You need other parties that come in, and that takes a lot of listening, which you can do. But John the Baptist was known for many things, but not for listening.
Folks, let me tell you, when I left school, keep in mind, I was very well raised in reductionist science. When I left college, I was taught force, control, genetically modify, splice it, force it with tillage, chemicals, control. I'm going to control it because I have to struggle, I have to try to make a living. Now I teach, and I ask a large audience, I said, audience, how many of you, and I'll stand in front of a large group, I said, audience, how many of you were taught from a parent, a grandparent, a relative, a professor, a teacher, a mentor, and said to you, if you're gonna get in farming, your job is to emulate it, love it, relationship, nurture it, understand its synergies, complementaries, understand how it works. See, what I get frustrated is when I hear economists and ecologists. Economists say, they do all the numbers and that, and they forget the ecology. And in the ecology, people forget the humans. They're together. We're part of the land. So why I get so passionate, I said, finally, I got it right. I know what the goal is. Do you know how frustrating it is to farm and try and help farmers when you don't even know what the goal is? When you leave university and your thought process is fragmented? Keep in mind, I was already 20 years in my career when I first understood this. And it wasn't until I read the right book, Ellen Savory's book, called Holistic Management, I go, got it. Now I know the goal. Mimic nature. And farmers, I'll tell you, love it. The tribes resonates really well with them. The Amish love the message. He goes, yep, God's creation. The Native Americans, they get it. They always believe that. In fact, the Native American said to me one time, he says, Ray, you white folks taught us how to kill. I said, yeah, we were wrong. So, total different vision. You watch when SCS came out, soil erosion. Symptom. They dealt with symptoms. They never really understood what the goal was. Mimic it. It's a total different paradigm.
Thank you. This is a time for our other speakers to kind of ask the questions that were prompted by your talks. Let's see what, so, Dr. Montgomery, looks like you have a question.
Yeah, well, having written a book about the history of science and creationism, this is absolutely the first time I've ever been called a fundamentalist. And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. And the reason is that I'm very familiar with the literature on soil and civilization, and I don't recall anyone in that literature arguing that soil erosion was the most important or the only problem that needed to be solved, as was argued this morning. It's not in there. What that literature consistently argues for is that soil erosion was the most neglected fundamental problem. And that's true. So I think we have to be very careful about our terminology, and that is one that I think was, shall we say, a little imprecise, to say the least.
Well,
and it's, I think, an important issue to bear in mind. Also, the confusion of the cult of expertise with the application of fundamentalism in the early history of the Soil Conservation Society. The SCS, or the Soil Erosion Service as it started, was given a mission, a singular mission. So it's no mystery of why they were focused on soil erosion. And at that time, soil conservation was virtually synonymous with preventing erosion, in part because of the obvious visuals that were so compellingly displayed. But the idea of soil health was not in the SCS's lexicon early on. Those ideas came out of the organic movement. And many of the ideas that were foundational for that are actually pretty similar to what Ray and I and others were sort of talking about. They didn't understand the mechanics. And I think that there's a really good application of your monoculture of the mind concept to seeing how that played through, but it wasn't quite, I think, how you described it. Because the early organic farmers, the mission of the early conservation efforts in this country were not to build soil organic matter. It was not to promote soil health. They didn't know how that worked. It was to simply keep the soil on the land. But there's two dimensions to soil health. And the early organic farmers got it, but they didn't have a mechanism to explain it. They didn't understand the microbial connections, among other things. So I'll stop there.
Okay, just briefly on that. I mean, I can, show you the quotation about this is the most important problem right in the middle of the Depression, and I'm not blaming them. I mean, this is building a new agency, creating a cause at that time, and I'm not blaming them for the use of visuals. That they were showing the Little Grand Canyon and showing, this is what soil erosion looks like. This is what you need to do when you build a new movement, when you build a new cause. But this is now 80 years in the past, and maybe we should have a more kind of a step back and say, wait a minute, how much do we build on those visuals? One story, I was a native of Germany, I'm a native of Germany and lived in Germany, and a couple of years ago I got a call from a journalist when one of those dust storms actually happened in Germany. German soils are more resilient by and large. In blunt terms, you can make more nonsense with them, but at some point you even have these dust situations with a storm blowing on one of the German autobahns and major accidents, and Germans don't mess with their autobahns. So and I got a call, we need to do something now, the soil is striking back. I was thinking, you have been sitting there in your office, you could have known about soil erosion, you could have known about depletion, about soil compaction, all the problems that are there for decades, and you did never report on that, never called me to say anything about this. I fear, these disaster imaginations, they capture our imagination, but my fear for the 21st century is really more death by 1,000 cuts. And we don't have visuals for that.
Any other questions? Yes, Dr. Lau.
A comment, Frank, that you made was a very good one, urbanization. 21st century is really the century of urbanization. In 1950, we had only 2 mega cities in the world. And a mega city is a city of 10 million people. Now there are 28. By 2100, there will be 80 mega cities. Lagos, Nigeria will have 83 million people. A mega city of 10 million requires 6,000 tons of food a day. Those nutrients coming into the cities do not get back. Unless we plan how to recycle those nutrients coming into the city, which are now a liability, we have a serious problem at our hands. We must plan now. Therefore, big cities, whether it's New York, Mumbai, or Mexico, Sao Paulo, Rio, we must plan how to use the nutrients and water from these cities to grow food within the city perimeter. 20% fresh food, 10%. That planning at urban level is very important. I thought your point was well taken.
Thank you. Other responses? Otherwise, I'm going to turn to some audience questions. One of which seems like a bit of a side turn, but I know I've heard from some of you about, we focus on farm fields, but our urban areas, maybe not necessarily Lagos, are fields. We have lawns. So could you comment on the monoculture in urban and suburban areas, and maybe what the role of soil quality is in non-agricultural areas, places where we aren't necessarily growing crops? And I guess that could include forests too.
And just to tag on to that, it seems to me that your discussion of monocultures has something to say about this also, Frank. Either one of you,
It's more suburban areas.
Sure, I can.
Dr. Simard, I think you have a comment.
Okay. So I live in a big city called Vancouver, part of the time, but I also live in the forest. And so most of the time I'm in the forest, which I'm going to talk about this afternoon. When I'm in the forest, I see variation. When you walk even across 1 hectare, you see many, many microsites. And in each one of those microsites is a variety of plant species. There's whole communities that are associated with little microsites. And when you get to know a piece of land, you get to know those little plant communities, all that diversity, that each one is attuned to that piece of land, to that soil, and the soil is attuned to that plant community. In an urban environment, and I would say in a monoculture as well, we ignore that diversity. So, and yet that is the very breath of life, is in that diversity. It is in the diversity of the soil organisms that are feeding on each other. It's in the diversity of the plants that the soil food web is dependent upon. In an urban environment, when you go and look at where they, for example, what is planted and where it's planted, what is planted is usually a very simple or exotic, or the same thing down a boulevard, which looks beautiful, and we love that. I think that as humans, we're drawn to that, but it's not a very healthy environment. And not only are we putting in monocultures of plants and exotic plants, but we're making the soil into a monoculture. So if you go and you look in a development and you look in the soil pit where they're going to plant those trees, and I've done this where I live in Vancouver, in these brand new developments that are supposed to be the icons of sustainable living, green living. My university advertising that this is the most sustainable city in the world. And I go and I look down in those soil pits where they're going to put the trees, and there's nothing there. There's no organic matter, there's no life, there's no connection to the real world, and they plunk those trees down and they say, they expect them to live for a long time and create, a healthy environment. But we're missing the fundamentals. So the fundamentals come down, and I'm sorry for the use of the word fundamental, but the basic principles.
It's a hook.
Let's call it a principle. The principles of diversity. And that diversity begets diversity, and diversity that begets diversity begets diverse processes and healthy processes. And we need to always come back to that and put that back into our environment. Because in a lot of cases, and I think looking at the slides of the agricultural fields and the cornfields and the cultivated fields, I see this like quite a barren place compared to what, the natural environment that I'm used to anyway. It's a very diverse place. Mm-hmm. Okay, so my last comment is we need to bring ourselves to that, right? As we move into the cities, our opportunities for seeing that diversity goes down and down and down. And we need people on the land to look and to know that land and to know how it's changing and to work with the land to make it more. And as we have to make more of an effort as our populations are migrating into cities, because it's going to get harder. But we do need to make that effort, because I think that is where the solution lies.
Lots of hands here.
Yeah, we'll start with Mr. Archuleta, and then David Montgomery, and then we'll come down.
How many people live in a subdivision? Raise your hand. Okay. About 12 to 15 years ago, NRCS did a study on compaction in New Jersey on lawns, football fields, and they found out, just to give you perspective, concrete is 2.2 grams per centimeter cube. That means very little pore space, a lot of mineral, very few pore space. So they went and they did sampling on lawns. They were almost concrete. Mm-hmm. See, and not just lawns, but football fields. In fact, a lot of kids got really injured in football fields Not because so much the contact, because when they hit the ground, it was so compacted. My point is, when they build a subdivision, what do? They come with a massive bulldozer, compact the living tar out of everything, put a little bit of grass, give you a tree, call it good. They've done that, we've done that all over all of our cities. So we have impermeable surfaces. So the water just get half an inch, you have massive flooding. So we've done this to all of our system. Now, one of the biggest enemies that we have is struggles, and even me, I have a really big problem, and I struggle with it. I almost come into a shake. It's okay to see weeds. Clover is not a weed. It feeds the grass and gives diversity into the system. We want to go out there and spray it and kill the clover, kill everything. We don't want to see no bees. We want to see beautiful, homogeneous grass. Wrong. Even a lot of our farmers get brutally treated horribly because when they see that multi-species cover crops, they say, well, look at that weeds growing out there. And the farmer gets judged and may even lose some of the land because he's growing a cover crop.
Thank you.
So we have to change the way we look at things.
I want to change the order slightly, David. I'm going to come back to you.
Yeah.
But Frank, I'd like you to respond as one of the
You
speakers.
want me, as a non-US citizen, comment on the American lawn? Well, that's quite a challenge here. Well, it grows here rather easily. If you look at what the lawn is and how the lawn actually became a pan-American phenomenon, it's not natural that it grows in Arizona. There was a lot of chemistry, a lot of development of the right seeds going to this. And of course, the lawn, I mean, it's sometimes hard to explain to well, non-Americans, especially if you go to East Asia, what is the lawn? Is it just a very simple question that you actually do get asked? And I mentioned this, we are, of course, departing from where we are, which is a good thing. We talk from America. We're in America, and we look at this from an American lens here on the podium, but just appreciating the diversity of approaches around the globe, and I think the pitch for diversity that is there, not least in terms of the diversity of people that are there. I mean, Ray, I looked at your slides and I liked your lecture, but there were no women there. If this were the lecture on Africa, there would be plenty of women there. And I think we need to look at diversity in all its incarnations. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I'll just add that I ask the lawn question every time I'm behind my lawnmower. Why? Dr. Chenu, as an agronomist,
Yes.
you probably have something to say about this.
Lawn is the urban monoculture. And yes, I think soils in the cities are very important. They're very important, and lawn does one thing, is to infiltrate the water. I don't know how it is here in the cities, but in many cities in Europe, the water that comes from precipitations and goes on buildings is treated exactly as the used water that comes out of your kitchen or bathroom. And this, in a sense, is a waste. So at least these lawns infiltrate the water. But I think we need diversity. We need biodiversity. And we cannot ask the people to have cities more dense, to protect, to reduce the expansion of our agricultural land, and have cities mineral. We need life. We need biodiversity. So we have, I think, the urbanism has to compensate the density by biodiversity, by nature, and you can grow something else than grass on the urban soils. I am working on projects where people grow food in the cities, micro farms, so it can appear very anecdotal. It is in a sense. I think the idea there, it's not, well, in some cities, in Lagos, and it's extremely, in Madagascar, extremely important to be able to grow food in the city where you live. Mm-hmm. It is a question of survival and better livelihood. In cities in all rich countries, I think it's something else. It's more connecting with nature and maybe understanding, because you grow a few tomatoes on a small plot of land, what is agriculture? And this, we need it. We urbans are so far away from agriculture, from understanding what it is, that I think we should promote urban agriculture for that, for connecting people with nature, and for all the benefits you have when you connect with nature and with others. How do you grow your potatoes? I would like to know. And it also brings another service. We're talking about flow of nutrients and matter. the biomass from the crops comes into the cities. We consume, we make up, there's a lot of nutrients in there, of nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, carbon. The soils in the city can also recycle those. And then you can have soils in the cities that are extremely rich in organic matter, extremely fertile. And then you can grow biodiversity, and you can grow food. You can have services and be hooked, be related more to nature.
Just an observation about how sorry. Didn't mean to step on your applause. Just an observation about how this question about lawns really does connect up things that Frank has been talking about and things that Ray has been talking about, and that is the way in which monoculture is a state of mind, and also the way in which peer pressure is a big deal. Farmers experience peer pressure, neighbors experience peer pressure about their lawn, and to the degree to which we really believe we ought to have one is, you know, as Foucault might say, we internalize the panopticon, but what I mean is like the neighbors come inside of our head, right? And we come to believe, I have to have a lawn. My homeowners association was sued because, among other things, I didn't have one. By my neighbors.
Okay. Wow. Dr. Montgomery, you had a comment also.
Yeah, yesterday I showed you what happened when we pulled the monoculture lawn that we bought, that our house came with, off. What I didn't tell you is what we did to part of that space. Well, we replanted part of a lawn, but we replanted with 2 species of grass, one that grows in the warm season, one that grows in the cool season, and clovers and daisies all together. So stuff's always growing and coming in. We don't have weed problems. We have nice little pink and white flowers that come in at the right time of the season, and we just mow it all down and let the worms take it below ground. And below our lawn, we've taken it from less than 1% organic matter to about 8%. It's not quite as much as the rest of the yard, but we have huge opportunities in our parks, in our yards, all kinds of urban spaces to rejuvenate the soil beneath the surface that we use. And this problem of a monoculture and thinking that that is the thing we need is a very real problem in that regard. But there are other ways, changing what we think of as a lawn, what makes a beautiful lawn. I now can't imagine having a lawn that doesn't have little pink and white flowers every 6 months. It just wouldn't be a nice lawn.
I've been relatively silent on this one because it's all a bit soil, you know. And I know this is a soil conference, and I do research in soil, but I also do research in human health, and the predominant amount of my work is in that area. And there's a far more fundamental and direct link between human health and societal health and diversity in our cities. What you're proposing is to increase the organic matter in the soils, to increase the diversity of the environment, but that has a fundamental impact upon children. The immune system needs exposure to a complex ecosystem. It's experienced it for thousands of years. We've been selected for. The people alive today, your ancestors were selected to breed based on their ability and their immune system's ability to withstand the exposures they received. Right? You need exposure. And if you lack it, your immune system overreacts. And I would argue, and I have a lot of evidence to back up my arguments, that the vast majority of the major diseases that we see in our society today, from the rise of autism, the rise of food allergies, of skin allergies, of gastrointestinal disorders, even of things like diabetes and neurodevelopmental problems that lead to our inability to focus in school, right, are actually linked to a lack of diverse exposure of our children in early life. So I would like to make a point for that. Higher diversity has direct and measurable impacts upon how your immune system develops, therefore how your brain develops, and that will change society.
I'm going to shift to a slightly different tact on this, but it's a question that's come up in the literature. I've seen it in some of the books written about this, but it comes up in regards to the talks yesterday about climate, and Ray certainly highlighted it, and that's the role of animals in the agricultural system. There's a polarization out there. I had a discussion with one member of our audience, by email in the last few weeks, about a report that argued very vehemently that animals, grazing animals, ultimately make the climate situation worse. And yet, we have a pretty strong proponent here saying it doesn't. So I'd like, particularly people who have some systemic ecology and some climate experience, Dr. Chanu, Dr. Simard, but also Dr. Lau, to kind of comment on what the science is telling us about animals. What is the richness of that picture?
I can.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not an animal ecologist at all, and I study forests that have animals in them, and I recognize the role, and I'm increasingly examining them. But I think what I can say is that a system is of many parts, and that includes all of the creatures, or all of the functional groups of creatures. And when we speak of diversity, which includes the animals, and I'll get back to your comment there, but that it's not just diversity, right? It's not just many, high richness. It's not just like a greater abundance of many species. It's how you combine them together. It's knowing what the land will grow, right? It's not just having many species. It's which ones. Which plants grow together and which animals grow with those plants. And I think, if we say, yes, animals are part of the landscape, it's true, but we need to know which ones. It's not just going to be always cattle. Yeah, they play a role, but when you start looking at the natural ecosystems, you realize it's a whole web of creatures that work together, right? And they're diverse, and they belong together in certain functional groups. And the only way you can really know about that is to know the land, right? So again, getting back to, it is not doing the same thing everywhere, even with cattle, even with the crop. Even if you have a diverse crop, don't do the same diverse crop everywhere. It's about knowing the soils, the land, that little creek draw, that little knoll. And I think, if I look at German forests, for example, and German forestry, which is, we learned a lot from German forestry, we didn't apply it the way the Germans developed forestry. They developed it on a valley-by-valley basis. They knew each valley. They named their valleys after their families and their ancestors who knew those valleys for centuries. And then we brought those practices to North America, and we made them all the same, right? We applied them as though we could apply them everywhere, but they were really developed for those particular areas. And I think that's a really good thing to always keep in mind, and we always need to know our piece of land and to know what goes with what.
Thank you.
Dr. Chanu.
Yes, I would like, this is a complex question, and there are many dimensions, environmental dimensions, more spiritual dimensions, different nutritional dimensions. I would like to start from one observation. I don't know if you ever had a look at a global map of methane emissions of the world. It is very striking because it's extremely heterogeneous. You have whole areas where you have vast grasslands around the Himalaya, in the India, nothing. The red spots, where are they? There are some in the US, and the ones I know better are the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium, Western France, UK. This is where we have concentrated raising cattle. So it's not. There are vast areas in the world where you cannot cultivate because it's slopey, because of the climate. And then having animals is just the natural way of living. And there are in Africa, in different parts of the world, communities who eat essentially meat because they have in a sense, they have no choice. It's either grass or meat. The land is not proper to cultivate, to have crops. But where the huge methane emissions come is where we have concentrated industrialized cattle raising. So it's not yes or no, it's more the system and how we do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And in France, for example, we have cattle also in central France. It's not a spot but they are out there. They're in the grassland, and there's no hot spot of methane emissions. So, it's just one part of the answer, an observation.
Can I just say very, very briefly, because this is really cool. the guy that runs, the CEO of the largest producer of meat in America today, and I can't remember the name of the company, someone else might be able to tell me that, but he's put right now about a $300 million investment from the company's program funds of innovation into Beyond Meat, the new startup that's leading the revolution in using plant proteins, resynthesizing them as animal protein, and providing that as a meat-free alternative. Because as he says, we need to end industrialized meat production. People want better meat quality, they want better choices, and so if you want to mass produce and make meat massively available, let's take the plant protein and provide that in your chicken nuggets, provide that in the crap that you can't taste, right? And if you want a good steak, we'll get that from a farm where the animals are raised in a way that's sustainable, right? And that makes a lot of sense to me.
Dr. Lal, you've spent a career working on some of these issues.
Just a very
Curious to know your
short comment. When I came back to Ohio 20 years after graduation, I asked my department head, what is the most dominant farming system now in the 80s, late 80s? He said, well, in the 60s, when you're a student, the farming system was corn, soybean, wheat, meadow. And now the system is corn, soybean, Florida. Mm-hmm. And that Florida part has changed the whole thing. And animal, which a very important part, is a social dimension that we have to address. Very important part. I want to just, another point, Ray, your excellent presentation. I had a wow moment in there, and I must confess that when you had that book by Gabe Brown, 3 tons per acre per year of carbon sequestration, that was really a wow moment, because that would require 750 kilogram of nitrogen in addition to 40 tons of biomass and then phosphorus 150. I would be perfectly happy if the decimal point was there in front of 3. It would be already excellent. But I just wanted to let you know that was very good. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. Ray, could you quickly, I'd like to get a couple more questions, but could you quickly respond, since you have been the champion of the animal, just sum up how you respond to some of these comments?
A lot of people don't realize that, you know, it sounds really nice about using plant protein, but people don't realize, you know how much chemical fertilizer just for one application of corn, for example? It's 150 units. You can run your car for 600 miles just to make chemical fertilizer. The way the industrial ag, the whole concept, all of it, the way we grow plants, the way we grow animals, is wrong. It's not biomimicry. I am not going to support somebody who says, I'm going to make artificial meat, put all the ingredients, use plants. I'm not doing it. I'm going to stick to nature's molecules, the way the Creator did it. I want plant and animal the way He did it. I already went down that road with, we're going to genetically work our way out of here. It don't work. Mimic it. It's the most efficient way. I am not going down that road. We've been that road again, and I'm not going there. Because I'll tell you, the farmers, why they're able to integrate animals and plants into their system, no more chemical fertilizer, no more fungicides, no more insecticides. And by the way, organic, see, it's easy to be academic, but when it comes down to the trenches of working with the producer and making the living, it's a total different world. I'm going to tell you, the only way organic's going to work well on a large scale, you have to bring animals into the system. Because the reason some of the most destroyed soils on this planet are organic farms. The weeds are eating them up. People don't understand. The moment you till, you wake up these art strategists. They stimulate more weeds. It's a problem. The way we're controlling now going to organic regenerative agriculture is this. We're going to bring animals into the system. We're going to fence the farms, put permanent pastures, and then we only till once every 4 years. Once every 4 years. The soil cannot handle continuous tillage. People don't understand how destructive it is.
Thank you. I think you've seen that there's an argument in here that will probably be explored more in your conversations.
Yeah.
What is nature? You know, what do we mean when we say we're going to mimic nature? There's going to be an argument about that, what that means. But also, carrying on from that, this argument about livestock, it's going to go on. I want to turn to one last question, which really returns to Dr. Ukiter's discussion, which is several different ways of saying it, but in light of the theme of your talk, there seems to be a danger that you're saying that we would make carbon sequestration the new monoculture. So how do we avoid that? How do we address what is a real issue? It's a powerful issue, it's important, and soil is a part of the solution or a part of the management, to use your terminology, but how do we avoid making that a monoculture?
Well, first of all, listening more to Claire and Ratan, who made the point yesterday that this is not this is not a monocultural way that this should go down to. But I think it's important to look really at the general parameter. What is framing this discourse? It's not just a matter of awareness. It is really a matter of where is the money? Where are the institutions? Where are the mindsets? And if you look at this in a global climate change regime context, and if you look at the figures that are in play on adaptation and mitigation, more in theory now as it stands than on the reality, you just wonder, if there's a lot of money in there, if there's fixed programs in there, this can have awkward. I'm not arguing against the money, but I'm arguing against, well, a policy that always observes itself. We talked about subsidies yesterday, we talked about the monetary benefits that are in play, and yes, we live in a world where we monetize everything, so we cannot just say, well, for this one big challenge, we make an exception here, but we really need a culture of self-observation with every step and a culture of self-correction. If something goes wrong, if this has awkward effects, this can go in the wrong direction, and we need to self-correct here and really think very carefully about state power. That is one of my big concerns that I have. In Western societies, we often talk about the state as a problem-solving agency. The Soil Conservation Service is there to help you. This is not the state that you see in many parts of the world. And if you see government policies and say the Saar zone, the greening of the Saar, a lot of that greening of the Saar zone was about agroforestry, about taking state authority back. Are we pushing that state authority back in now in the reign of a global climate regime? Well, I do not know, but we should think about this on multiple levels all the time and really watch ourselves as we advance step by step towards a global policy regime.
Thank you. And I want to just say thank you for your questions. We are out of time for questions. There are many more good questions that we've not been able to address. We are passing those questions on to our speakers, and we'd like to thank them for their answers.
And just two announcements as you're leaving, and that is, don't forget the tables in the forum where you can continue our conversations. They were really popular yesterday. I assure you there will be as many people there today. And secondly, don't forget to visit the soil experience also in the forum. And don't forget that at 1:18 your phone is going to make a horrible racket.
I almost forgot my...
Okay.